Okay, so now I'm going to go through in more detail this 75% issue and the reductions to your loan forgiveness. So step one, we have the 8-week period. We're measuring our expenses. We get that total amount that we spent. So let's use a $100,000 loan as an example. We spent $70,000 on payroll costs. We spent $30,000 on non-payroll costs. So we have $100,000 eligible for forgiveness, but we know we're going to have to reduce that because step two here, we have to look at if we spent 75% of the amount on payroll costs, and if we haven't, we have a reduction. So we know we're going to have some reduction, and I'll show you how you calculate that. Step three is we have to look at our head count. We look at our head count of the total number of employees during that 8-week period compared to an elected prior period. Compare the ratio. If it's less than 1, we have a further reduction of our loan amount. And then if we reduce compensation, we also have another reduction. So let's look at the 75% rule in more detail. And there has been a lot of confusion here. Some people think this is a cliff where if you don't spend 75%, you don't get any forgiveness. We don't think that's the case. And one of the reasons why is, number one, that example I gave about independent contractors. If they truly are just an independent contractor with no employees, and this was a cliff rule, they would get no forgiveness at all because they can't satisfy the 75% rule because of the limitations. So I don't think that's how it's going to work. I think you're going to have, like it says here, that just not more than 25% of the loan forgiveness amount can be attributable to non-payroll costs. So your loan forgiveness amount is that 8 weeks total expenses that you spent. So when you look at that, you have to look at your non-payroll costs and your payroll costs and get the proper ratio. And to the extent that that ratio exceeds the allowed amount, you have to get a reduction. And so we'll go through an example here. We have our $100,000 loan. As I mentioned, we spent $70,000 on payroll cost, $30,000 on non-payroll cost. So we know there's going to be a reduction because the 75% test is not met. So how we think it's going to work, and again, we could be wrong until we get SBA guidance here, but this is our interpretation of the language of the statute and the guidance that the SBA has currently issued, is that non-payroll cost is limited to 25% of the forgivable amount. So you have to have a 3-to-1 ratio here, 75-25, 3-to-1 between your payroll cost and your non-payroll cost. So to determine your forgivable portion of these non-payroll costs, you can divide your payroll cost by 3 to get the proper ratio. So $70,000 divided by 3 is $23,333. So you have forgiveness of $93,333 in lieu of the full $100,000 that you've spent. So again, we look at our ratio, $23,000 out of the full $93,000 forgiveness is 25%. So you have that proper ratio now. So then, now that the 75% rule test has been applied, we have to look at our employee headcount.